You're listening to Infosec Sidekick. I'm your host, Travis Romero, and today I'm excited to dive deep into an exciting new resource that was recently released into the cybersecurity detection engineering ecosystem. Lubins, or Living Off the Orchard, macOS binaries, has been making its round and causing quite a buzz online. It's an Apple twist on the more familiar living off the land binaries used by attackers to operate inside networks undetected. My guest today is the man behind the release of this fantastic collection of information, Brendan Chamberlain. Brendan is a senior detection engineer at Zoom, who has been taking the initiative to share his research with the community. We discussed the process he undertook to curate this information and how he chose to present it to the community. We also get extremely practical and discuss ways organizations might utilize Lubins inside their own threat detection teams. If you haven't already, be sure to follow the podcast and feel free to share this episode. And now, without further ado, here is Brendan Chamberlain. Hey everyone, welcome to Infosec Sidekick. I am here with Brendan. Brendan, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Travis. Brendan Chamberlain, thanks so much, Travis, for having me on the show. Currently a detection engineer at Zoom. Been working in kind of like the detection and response side of the house for the majority of my career, going back now about 12 or so years. Started up in just out of college in the healthcare sector, building out an information security program, kind of like in the late 2000s, which was an interesting opportunity. That's when healthcare really, the government started coming down with the HIPAA hammer. Everyone in healthcare kind of had to get their act together from a cybersecurity perspective. Bootstrapped a lot of the kind of the fundamental controls in that environment. Spent a lot of time doing like IDM, quite a bit of engineering work, and kind of slowly pivoted into the incident response and security operations type work. Built out the organization's incident response program. Once that was finished, built out a larger SOC and kind of all the different controls to enable a SOC, like a SIM and security orchestration system, all that type of stuff. So that kind of led me to where I am now. Working in detection engineering, kind of like kicked out of the SIM area into like more specific, hey, how do you actually implement detection content? So that's where I'm at now.
Very cool, man. Yeah, it's I feel like there's probably so much, if we really wanted to do like a whole career based podcast on, even that's not really what we're here to talk about today, but I think maybe just something that might be worth digging in a little bit to about your background. Would you say you kind of started at smaller organizations and then like smaller security teams and, had more responsibility, just kind of broadly speaking about building controls? And then, obviously Zoom's a fairly large company, where you can kind of do some more specialized stuff like detection engineering. Would you say that's broadly been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was working at those, the smaller healthcare organization, my scope was just like jack of all trades, like anything that my boss was throwing at me. So I was doing engineering work, architecture work, a little bit of like risk management type stuff. And part of my role was like going and giving new employee briefs. So like doing presentations on like the basics and the 101 of keeping things secure. And yeah, right on point. So, as I kind of worked the healthcare system that I worked at kind of got bigger and my role kind of slowly got more narrow. And then, now where I'm at, at Zoom is like hyper focused, hyper specialized. So absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value there. Just maybe the key point I'm pulling at least from that, because I have a similar background. Just been doing like incident response, generally speaking, like security operations, almost the entirety with like small pivots to certain areas. I noticed you mentioned, I believe you said like identity. You had a little bit of work in identity. Funny enough, that's the one place. I don't know. I feel like all security people have like that one place they never have been. It's almost like Mufasa and Simba meme where it's like this is your kingdom. Like, and for me, like the shadow thing was like always identity. Do you have one of those where you're like, wow, I never did that?
Uh, yeah. Let's see here. So I never really. I never really got like too much hands on with like implementing network specific security controls. I don't know why. I feel like all the organizations I worked at was always like really boxed into like the IT network admins were doing the firewall stuff. So I never really got too much exposure to that side of the house. So yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
that's mine for sure. Yeah.
That's cool, man. Well, thanks for entertaining that question. The one other thing I wanted to ask you about your background, um, I believe you have a master's degree. Is that correct?
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about that experience, how you apply that to your role, and where that has provided value for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so man, it was a while ago now, probably 7 years or so. Um, Pursued the master's at Champlain College up here in the Burlington, Vermont area, which is where I'm at now. Has an awesome. They're actually just getting it started at the time. It was for Masters of Cybersecurity Operations, and it was definitely a program that was a lot more, I guess, like technical and more like in the weeds, hands on type of stuff. So yeah, at the time, I was kind of pivoting from that IDM and kind of like architecture engineering role into the incident response and security operations side of the house. So it felt like a pretty good time to kind of pursue that degree. And yeah, so it was entirely online, which worked out really nicely. Working 9 to 5 and then setting aside few school night hours to take care of that. But yeah, it was at least for me personally. I tend to learn a lot more with like hands-on type of stuff. So it was a lot of that, a lot of like writing Python automation from like a security use case perspective, and at the time there actually was an entire class that was focused like pretty specifically on detection engineering, which at that time detection engineering was really, I don't even know if it was a very big thing. So yeah, I found quite a bit of benefit in pursuing the degree at that time. So yeah, hammered it out, and definitely yeah, I feel like it was very valuable.
That's great. That's awesome. Two things there. I never got my master's. I've always kind of been thinking about doing it. I can imagine looking back in the rearview mirror 7 years later, especially since you seem to have gotten very lucky. Maybe this was like your strategic choice of choosing this program, but that it was very hands on. And I mean, it sounds like it plays a direct role in what we're going to be talking about here shortly and in your current role. But just kind of doing it, I do commend you for that because it's something that definitely is, I think, valuable to anyone's career. And the fact that you were able to do some of the hands-on stuff with like Python and you're very like on point. I was actually gonna to talk about um, when detection engineering like became its own almost like specialty. Um, and definitely I'd say, yeah, 7 years ago ish. Um, I think everyone, including myself, like we knew we had our SIEM products, we knew we had like rules, um, but for whatever reason, it just like it wasn't called detection engineering. I'm sure there was like a significant amount of that happening. Um, Yeah, this is a super random question. Do you remember the first time you heard detection engineering? Like, when did that pique your radar?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I don't know, maybe probably around the same time that I finished up that degree. I feel like I started hearing more and more about the concept. I think there more technologies like the all the XDR and all the like newer um, controls that are out there kind of brought that entire function out of the woodwork. But yeah, I mean, I want to say it's only like 5 years old max, but I'm sure some people out there will probably correct me. And I think like from like a a private sector like a company perspective, working on a security team with inside like a private company is a little different than folks have been doing technically detection engineering type functions within the companies out there that are producing security products. So like technically, way
Mm.
back in the days of when IDSs were just coming out, those are technically all detection engineers. But yeah, we definitely didn't start using that term until just recently, I feel.
Yeah, and now it's kind of its own. I mean, it's not kind of. It definitely is its own class of cybersecurity professionals, um, and a very valuable one at that. One that I guess both you and I have found our way into. Um, and you said people will probably correct you. I think, uh, yeah, the term coming into existence is probably debatable. But I often think about how, you know, maybe the generation, like a generation before us, where all the security people always said, well, it wasn't called cybersecurity back then. We were just doing it. Um, so that certainly is something that happens within cybersecurity. Like these little niches or specialties start evolving, and I believe that's definitely happened with detection engineering. So all right, let's get into the actual reason. I asked you to be on the podcast, which very very excited that you accepted the invitation because you had actually hit my radar because someone at my current organization, was like, "Hey man, you should check this out." I think maybe I saw it on Twitter and it looks really cool. The first thing I noticed was the name. I was like, this is hilarious. I don't know why I thought it was hilarious. We can certainly dive into that. But I believe you were part of a project. I don't know if you were the sole creator. Maybe you could dive into this a little bit of something called Living Off the Orchard. So let's start talking about it. Give us an intro. What is Living Off the Orchard?
Yeah, sure thing. So, living off the orchard, macOS binaries, known in short as Lubins, is pretty much just it's a resource for cybersecurity professionals, detection and response folks, offensive security engineers, researchers, pretty much anybody that's interested in any aspect of cybersecurity. Um, a resource that contains a list of macOS binaries that can be used by threat actors, for malicious purposes. So the idea pretty much came from two existing projects that are out there. So there's Lol Bass living off the land. I think it's binaries and scripts, which is more or less the Windows version of Lubins. And then GTFO bins, which I can only imagine where that acronym came from, which is the Linux version. So yeah, it intends to kind of fill the gap that those two projects left. What I definitely wrestled with for a little bit is, so as part of the base of Mac OS, it includes quite a few binaries that are already found in Linux through the BSD foundations. So left pretty much all of those out of this particular project, and this one really only contains the binaries that you'll specifically find in Mac OS. with a couple exceptions, and we can get into that. But so each binary contains just kind of a general summary of what is the binary, what is it legitimately used for normally. 9 times out of 10 it's like system administration type stuff. And then more importantly, it'll each listing includes several use cases that outline how attackers could potentially use a binary to achieve whatever goal they're trying to achieve. So yeah, there's a couple different ways of interfacing with Lubins. So the website itself is lubins.io. Just contains a pretty nicely laid out list of all the different binaries and pretty nice little UI. And I think and hope at least a lot of folks will find quite a bit of use in the JSON file, which contains pretty much every single Lubin with all the data that you'll find on the website in like a serialized format that'll hopefully be helpful for automation and pulling into security tools. So there's that. Also developed a Python command line tool and library that can be used in the same manner as the JSON content. So yeah, that's what it is in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource, and I'm sure work has been done around identifying bits and pieces of this by many people over the years. But you've done an excellent job of really bringing that together. I will say there's something to be said about a beautiful UI. And, this isn't like a user experience podcast by any means, but, the fact is, I think it's a lot more intriguing to be able to just browse and explore and interface with something that is potentially like a complicated concept via a nice web interface versus like a command line interface or within a Twitter thread or the like. Is this the first project you've produced with this kind of level of user design, user experience? And just for people listening, again, loobins.io. Go check it out. It's really, really a solid website to browse around at. So yeah, like what is it built on? What made you kind of pursue this nice design?
Yeah, I was hoping you'd ask. So yeah, LOLBAS and GTFO bins, the Windows and Linux versions, are both they have a similar interface. They're both, I think, using the same exact one, which let's see, I think it's running on a Jekyll static site, which is great, which is a really nice. I want to say it's like might be based on Perl. I can't remember offhand. But yeah, it's a great tool. I really like the way those two sites are designed. I like the UI, and I think it works really well. But I kind of want to differentiate Lubins a little bit, just kind of like being
It's very Mac of you, by the way.
Exactly. Being a Mac fanboy, I thought, would Steve Jobs approve of this particular?
Oh boy.
So
it's a whole bunch of things we could dig in there from a mental health perspective. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I wanted to be a little bit different. So kind of started digging through some of the other templates and themes out there for Jekyll, which at the time I was pretty familiar with. My professional portfolio is built on top of Jekyll. Really nice static website generator. But eventually stumbled upon Hugo, which is very similar static website generator. And there was a particular theme out there that caught my eye called Docs. It's DOKS. Um,
Free or
so
paid?
free, yeah. So yeah, pretty much just grabbed that, started kind of playing around with it a little bit, and quickly realized that it would, it's very customizable, and realized that it kind of would work perfect for the Lubin's use case. So yeah, I had to pretty heavily modify the theme to kind of fit what I was trying to do with like the MITRE attack uh, tactic categories and the tags that are associated with all the Lubins. But yeah, I really like the design and kind of stuck with it and kind of tried to give it a little bit of a Apple Mac OS flair. So did some of my, I'm kind of like a novice graphic design, kind of always enjoyed doing the graphic design stuff. So I did the logo and all the other stuff you see there. So it was just kind of a fun project from design and web development perspective. I really like doing that type of stuff. Um, so
Yeah. Well, if there's one thing I've learned in the past like 5 years about cybersecurity, it's that you need to have like a sexy name for whatever it is, whether it's a vulnerability, a tool. There needs to be a cool logo, bonus points if it has like bleed or fire or something in it. But I really think you nailed it with the design, man. You know, from something that may provide like listeners value, just generally speaking, is there's obviously like a level of professional development and like public appearance that you're presenting when you release information like this, right? It's part of contributing to the community. And you could have simply chosen to upload this to your GitHub, which you did, and just kind of present it in this fashion. And ultimately, like that's where the meat of everything really is. But by taking this extra step, which to be honest, I mean, not this isn't to like downplay it or anything, but I think like it sounds like it's just kind of like getting to know Hugo and getting to know the layout and really just spending a little bit of time like putting this into a nicely readable format. Um, I mean, I don't know if I would have seen it, or I don't know if I would have paid as much attention, as bad as that is to admit, if it wasn't for that. Have you received similar feedback?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have. A lot of folks have reached out, kind of like specifically commenting on the website itself and the UI. So yeah, definitely, like you said, there's a lot of really good content that's just out there on people's GitHub repos. So I've seen even entire blogs that live inside of a bunch of markdown files on a GitHub repo. Um, so yeah, yeah. I think there's just some added value in making it a little more accessible outside of GitHub. And I think that there's a lot of folks out there that maybe don't necessarily spend as much time on GitHub as maybe you and I do. And maybe it's kind of like a bit of a mystery to them, which is fine. So it makes it a little more accessible to those folks.
Yeah.
So yeah, and another thing, what's pretty nice about Hugo and this particular theme is, and I've thought a little bit about it, but haven't quite figured out if I want to do anything. But you can localize everything, so technically, I could serve up all of Lubin's in several different languages pretty seamlessly using this one website. So that might be kind of like something down the road I
Wow.
think about doing.
Yeah,
Um,
good little like side project to just mess with that tech.
yeah,
Cool, man. Yeah. So I know we spent a decent amount of time talking about the presentation, but I think from a cybersecurity perspective, again, I just want to highlight, there's some lessons to be learned there from for detection engineers out there, for red teamers, for people who are doing security research. It really matters how you present the information, and it determines the level of impact. As much as you may not want to believe it, I think it's true nonetheless. Um, all right, let's get back to Lubin's. So you gather this information. Why did you do it?
Um, yeah, I mean, so really, I personally, and from my actual career perspective, found a lot of value in the content that was created in the low bass and GTFO bins projects, and started looking for a Mac OS version and didn't really find it. So that was kind of that for me. I've always, as you know, kind of like been a fan of the Mac OS stuff, and have had quite a bit of exposure from a cyber defense perspective as well. So yeah, I just kind of started digging into it, and the project pretty quickly formulated. Had a couple folks that I knew from working with at Zoom that were also kind of like experts in that field that helped me out early on. So yeah, I can't even, I don't even remember specifically when it all started now, but it just kind of happened really quickly. It was like a combination of like fleshing out the website and getting the schema that actually describes what should be listed in a Lubin together. And it kind of just all took off really quickly. Um,
Yeah. So you don't really have to maybe answer this in detail, or I don't know if it matters, but was this like based off of something that you needed to do during your day job? Like you were working on developing detections for Mac, and you're like, I guess it sounded that that was kind of the underpinning, right?
yeah. Yeah. So, you know, yeah, it's definitely, yeah, it's probably can't get into too much detail there, but definitely something that, like I said, found value in the low bass stuff, and pretty quickly imagine, man, there'd be a lot of value if this existed for Mac OS as well. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Fair. Fair. Um, so can you tell me what living off the land means? I think we touched on it a little bit, kind of in the beginning when we were starting our conversation. But like, what is living with the land, and why does it matter to know what that is in detection engineering?
Yeah, yeah. So living off the land, I think, is the notion that um, in recently, I guess, for the most part, we've gotten better at detecting kind of like the various TTPs that are out there for the way that threat actors are working in the wild. So I think there's been a shift in the way that threat actors are behaving nowadays, where they're essentially trying to evade all of the various controls that organizations have set up. And really, the best way to do that is just to look exactly, like um, a system a system admin's working on a workstation, or just a power user. So the general thought there is, actors are just using tools that are already built into to an operating system, rather than downloading whatever tools that they may have previously used that were popping EDR alerts or AV alerts, stuff like that. Um, so definitely kind of like a more advanced way of acting. I think the most recent report came out for, was it like Volt Typhoon was the Chinese actor that was just like using really simple tools built into Windows to like accomplish a lot of their objectives. So you definitely hear a lot more about it in the Windows area nowadays, and I think it's probably only a matter of time until there's a pretty big campaign that's taking advantage of Mac OS and the tools built into Mac.
Yeah, no kidding, man. And the tool that you built might be pivotal in helping organizations get ahead of that, right? So I think maybe that's a really good place to move. Um, I have a couple ideas of how you could use something like Lubins, right? From a detection engineering, from a threat hunting perspective. Um, what would be your like? vision for an organization or someone out there who's, just stumbling across Lubin's, how could they take that back to their company or whatever, and start getting value to get ahead of what we're kind of predicting here, which is, you know, there's going to be someone living off that orchard, a worm in the apple, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So I think what I would encourage most organizations out there to do is to use Lubins and take the various binaries that are listed in Lubins, and try and get an understanding of what how those binaries are being used as a baseline in their environment. So the truth is, a lot of those binaries probably will be used, or are actually being used in a completely legitimate manner. Especially in enterprises, you're going to see a lot of like MDMs and security tools and developer tools out there that are have completely legitimate use of a lot of those binaries. So I think, yeah, the key is to kind of understand what that is. What does normal look like, and then use that baseline to understand. Okay, like here's something that looks a little suspicious. Like we don't normally see OSA script running in this manner, or PB paste is never used in our environment. Why is this? Why is this hitting now? Additionally, I don't know if I'd encourage an organization just to go ahead and like say, all right, we're going to alert on every single time we see this particular binary run. That's probably the wrong approach. Definitely want to take and use this type of data as kind of like a correlation or an indicator that's kind of associated with potentially other suspicious activity that's occurring to kind of bring forth malicious activity. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like really good advice. And, maybe if you have a moment to talk about how you go about detection engineering. I know it's a little bit of a pivot here, but you kind of, you talked about the fact that these things are likely going to be in your environment. You don't, you wouldn't necessarily recommend there being some kind of, just baseline alert for any time you see a specific binary in your environment. I believe we've all been in that, at that place. And even after we do a lot of work, something could come up, a freak incident and or a freak just admin event, and you all of a sudden you've got 100 tickets in your queue. Um, just at a really high level, what are some like highlights for you of how to like deploy the detection engineering life cycle? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I think that kind of dovetails a little bit off of what I was just talking about, as far as targeting the binaries from less from an alerting perspective, and more of like an enrichment or context perspective. So let's just say, for example, you're an organization working in Splunk. Something that you might be able to do is, once you have a solid understanding of, hey, here are the completely normal uses of various Lubins, writing some type of search that pulls out everything that's not necessarily expected to be normal activity in an environment, and stashing that data either in like a lookup table or a summary index, and then using that data in conjunction with other searches that you have, or other detection content that you have in place. So maybe you have an EDR deployed on your Mac OS devices. So in theory, you could kind of string together that the context that's coming out of the running Lubins with things that are TTPs that are out there that are triggering in your EDR, or your AV solution, whatever it is. Um, and there's also, obviously you can string together multiple lubins that are triggering. So, for example, maybe you see OSA script running, and you're also seeing like curl pop on the same workstation, and you're seeing another lubin, PB paste going. So kind of stringing those three indicators together, kind of correlating them because they're occurring within a certain time span. So yeah, more of a definitely, like I said, not gonna want to alert every single time one of those binaries is run, but yeah, finding a way to kind of correlate multiple indications of suspicious activity.
Yeah. And I think it's okay if they never become an alert, right? Maybe that's, I don't know who the audience I'm talking to is here, but I definitely think there's some people out there who feel like if they're not generating an alert or creating an alert at the end of the day, um, there was value lost there. But Lubin's, to me, seems like a great tool to conduct threat hunting, to conduct baselining, to, like you were saying, enrich other types of alerts and TTPs. It doesn't have to be, let's find a way to use Lubins to just specifically alert on these types of events. That could be very difficult, actually, right? So getting creative with the the Lubins and the living off the land binaries in general seems to be a key to their existence anyway. Um, cool, man. Yeah, this is awesome. I did want to ask you like about the process of naming it. Living off the orchard, I thought was pretty creative. I can kind of guess where that came from, obviously. Apple, Mac. Um, but did you coin the term? Did someone did you have a dream? How did it come to you?
Yeah. So I initially, yeah, I think I coined the term. So yeah, it was kind of a play on words for obviously Mac OS, Apple. Um, Ironically enough, I actually literally live on this, on the side of an apple orchard, so it also just kind of like worked. It was top of mind for me. Like I think I named it around the time like all the apple trees started to blossom out there, so it kind of like worked out from that perspective.
You're
But
such a Mac fanboy, man. You had to live by
yeah,
an orchard.
yeah, I
Okay.
had to get Um, but yeah, so yeah, named it myself. I shortly after starting the project, I did some googling. I can't remember if someone like specifically used the term "living off the orchard" in like one of their blog posts somewhere, but I think there was at least one blog post that was out there that used that term. And I swear I saw it after I came up with the name, so it's like I'll give whoever it is credit, but yeah. Uh,
Very cool. Yeah, like I said, I think it's good. I think it's catchy. It made me chuckle. I really don't know why. Um, it just, to me, it was funny. I'll just leave it at that. It caught my attention. I think the last question I wanted to ask, but I'm notoriously bad at sticking to my word on that, is the application of MITRE ATT&CK to Lubins. Um, can you talk about how MITRE ATT&CK integrated to the project, and how you as a detection engineer might use that information to kind of pursue implementing Lubins?
yeah, yeah. So I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how to best organize the Lubins. I can't remember if the other projects are also using the MITRE ATT&CK tactics or not. But I found it was, I think there's only like 12 or 13 tactics at this point. So it kind of seemed like one of the easiest ways to kind of be able to group Lubins into kind of like specific containers. Tactics was like one of the ways I did it, and then we also have the notion of tags, which are just pretty much anything. But yeah, from an actual, how could you apply that? So you know, going back to our discussion on how could we implement this from a detection engineering perspective, you could kind of also use those tags to chain together um, multiple events and potentially show like an attack kill chain, so to speak. So if you're seeing a Lubin occur that's like in the initial access or execution tactics, and you're also seeing something in the collection tactic, like that might be a pretty good indicator that something's going on a particular workstation. So I think just having those there as context for that particular manner is somewhat valuable. And yeah, so those are also included in the actual the JSON version of Lubins and PyLubins. So something that could be pretty easily ported over to like a SIM or another detective control out there.
Cool. Yeah, and the other thing that I've personally noticed with MITRE ATT&CK, well, first of all, if you're developing anything like this, anything in the realm of what you have created, where the intention is to tie it to detection engineering, red teaming, whatever, um, again, it's another one of those just realities. Whether you like it or not, MITRE ATT&CK does seem to be the industry standard, especially when it comes to detection engineering. Do yourself a favor, tie it to MITRE ATT&CK. I promise you, others will find it useful if you don't use it yourself. And one of the main reasons I love it is because it also enables me as someone who works in security operations to put some rhyme to put some rhyme and reason to why I'm selecting certain things to look at. Uh, and this kind of like dives a little bit more into like the threat intelligence kind of aspect of MITRE ATT&CK, but you can actually find references out there that will say, here are the top TTPs for your industry, and you know, maybe us as like boots on the ground type people, we know like you could still be attacked by anything, right? Like just because some report comes out and says, this this specific tactic is what's going to get you in 2024. The board may see that, but but they're, man, I keep saying this a lot this podcast, whether you like it or not, they're going to care about that. So it's
Yeah.
really useful to be able to tie that, right, and say, I had a specific thought about, I'm going to look at these TTPs because they tie into some specific threat research that I did, and I looked at Lubins, pulled the ones that had relevant execution phase kind of TTPs, did a hunt, had these 2 alerts created, did these 3 baselines, and we didn't find anything. Well, this gives you that extra layer to be able to like add, to communicate that value add. Um, so yeah, just something I wanted to add there is I've found pretty useful for people. So definitely something that came to my mind when I was looking at Lupins. Um, but yeah, man, I think we're kind of getting close here. Totally gonna break my promise. I didn't promise, but um, one more question for you. What's next, man? Like, what is what's the plan for living off the orchard? Do you have any other things in development? Can people contribute? Just talk about the future there.
Yeah. So one big thing that I'm still working out. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it, but I want to figure out a way to kind of like almost prioritize the Lubins from almost like give them like a risk score so that organizations have a better way of like right now we have I think like 37 binaries. Which ones should folks look at first, right? Which are potentially the most dangerous to an organization. So I'm still trying to think through what that's going to look like. It's hard to do without having some type of like data set or something that helps me understand like how prevalent a particular binary is in an environment, from like a legitimate use perspective. Like it'd be pretty easy just to like say, hey, this particular binary is never seen in use anywhere, um, and if you see it used in this manner, it's like almost 99% guaranteed this is bad. Look at this. So yeah, still trying to work that out. Um, that's one thing. Also trying to right now. So I think like a week or two, Apple announced the release of the next version of Mac OS. So it's called Sonoma. I want to find a good way to kind of track any potential binaries that are added to the new version of Mac OS, and try and figure out if there's any new binaries that are introduced that could be included in loopins. And obviously do that going forward for any new major releases of Mac OS. And then I'm thinking about trying to dig a little bit more into the dynamic libraries that are included in Mac OS. So for Windows people, it's basically the same thing as a DLL. So that could be interesting to kind of explore how various dilibs could be used for malicious purposes. So that's definitely on the roadmap. But most importantly, there's still quite a few loopins that are out there that haven't even been covered yet. So still need to kind of work through a backlog of those. And it seems like every day there's more intel that's out there that's, here's a new binary that, either can be used or is being used by threat actors. So yeah, plenty to stay busy with there and a lot more to come. So definitely, keep your eye out.
That's awesome, man. Perhaps the unforeseen consequence, good and but maybe bad, depending on how you look at it, about releasing something like this. That's cool, right? You don't want it to get stale, certainly, and there's always going to be new developments. Some things will lose relevance. The more you add to it, the more it becomes to maintain. I did see there was multiple contributors on the GitHub. Is it possible for people to contribute to the project?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So on the website, there's an about section that includes instructions on how to either bring forward new binaries that could be included, or there's instructions for straight up forking the project and adding a YAML file for a new binary. So yeah, I realize that not necessarily everyone wants to jump in and get on GitHub and go through the process of forking repositories and doing pull requests. So I'm always more than happy to have folks like email me or hit me up on Twitter with new ideas, and I'll just put it in and give them credit in the loopin itself. So.
Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah, I would definitely encourage people to check it out. I mean, obviously that's the whole point of this podcast. I don't know if you knew it would hit this well. I don't know, we didn't really touch on, the reception you've received, you just like from a broader sense. But I hope that I'm grateful for it. It's a little bit silly, but I think you've done something um, that is just above and beyond what a lot of people will do. I'll just say that, right? Like in cybersecurity, and maybe there's people that want to do that. There's people out there that just don't quite know what to build. I think this is a really good example for people to like, a project that, it takes a lot of work, and everyone's busy, but it doesn't have to be anything like super crazy. You don't need to go out and discover a 0 day or anything like that, right? It's just kind of looking where there's a need and developing some content around it and putting it out there. So I wanted to say thank you. Thank you, obviously, for being on the podcast. Was there anything that you kind of wanted to say in closing where people can find you? Anything that I missed that is like, oh my God, I can't believe you didn't ask this about Lubins? Anything that we can close on?
Um, no, I think we just about covered it all. And thank you for those kind words, Travis. it's definitely been. I've actually had a lot of fun, kind of working on Lubins and getting it out there. It was really fun to kind of like get the hype train going when I first started developing it and kind of seeing how word spread about it. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, which is really great. So I'm happy to contribute to the community because I know a lot of other folks do the same. And yeah, I really hope that folks find value in Lupins. And yeah, like I said, there's instructions on the website if you're interested in contributing at all. I also I plan on kind of keeping folks updated on any new developments on either Twitter or LinkedIn. So you can find me there, Brendan Chamberlain on LinkedIn, and my Twitter handle is InfosecB. So I'll be posting updates there. And yeah, if you guys have any feedback, anything you want to throw at me, definitely feel free to send me a DM on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, again, I want to thank Brendan for joining the podcast. I hope you guys go check out lubins.io. It's a great resource for all of us out there in the cybersecurity space. So we don't have to do the research ourselves. Brendan did the work for us. Thanks again, man. Thanks for being on the podcast. And I hope you have a good day.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks so much, Travis. Thanks for having me.